So, okay, so this is our quick Authz chat. Sarah's uniquely qualified. She was product manager for Cedar at Amazon and now at Beyond Identity.
Yes.
And so I was one of the participants in the Authz interop. And let's just start with Authz. Like, what are your thoughts about Authz? Omri Gazit asserts that in 5 years, people will be using Authz, similar to OpenID Connect for authentication. What do you think's the future of Authz?
I think it's going to encourage more innovation in the space. There are some authorization protocols that don't have the things that Authz wants them to have today. And so I think that might get us closer to where we need to be in terms of feature completeness. However, I don't see a need that that kind of the group sees for everything to be the same across all platforms, right? Like, do we need search everywhere? Do we need all of the same endpoints in all of the same places? That's not where in the OpenID Connect case, it makes sense for authentication because you're going between domains for a reason. In the Authz case, usually authorization is done within the domain, and then it's decided, like, right, there's a decision point and an enforcement point where things leave the domain. But it's unclear why you would need both of those to be, why you would need two domains to have the same structure for their APIs.
Right. I really like how you're using the word domain there because it's similar to how I talk about cross-domain. But it's an interesting, it's a really interesting point. And in the old days, I might have said you're right. But today with MCP servers crossing domain boundaries, when I make a request and it goes to an MCP server and it goes to a different domain, do you think that we're maybe entering a world where federation becomes more normalized for authorization?
It's possible. We're still working out how MCP is going to negotiate its ability to do fine-grained authorization. So Atul Tushibagwale from Signal has a specification in the MCP universe about doing what he first called profiles and now are being turned into extensions. And the idea there is that we can profile MCP just like we profiled OpenID Connect. So we can have a healthcare profile, and we can have a government profile, and we can have a financial profile, so that we can get some of the same security controls that we have in those spaces into MCP, which has very few security, like shockingly little security controls right now. And so I could definitely see Authz being useful there in enabling that fine-grained authentication, especially in those high security use cases.
One of the challenges for cross-domain authorization, I think, is just going to be schema. Like if I have a widget and you're a supplier but you're going to receive this widget, but we call the widget different things with different properties, we'll never get like policy alignment. Do you think that half the challenge here is just getting like within an ecosystem or supply chain, like getting sort of agreement on what is the schema for our entities and resources and actions and stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, that's always been a problem in IAM, right? Going back to Zachamel, when we tried to make a schema for everything and it didn't work at all, because that's basically an impossible problem. But yeah, there's going to have to be some level of schema discovery or schema alignment that may require humans to be fully interoperable. If you have two domains and they both use Cedar, that's great. Is there a way that they can compare their schemas programmatically so that a human doesn't have to do that? I don't know. That would be a cool thing to build.
Now, you worked with the Cedar team as product manager for a little while. And one of the unique properties of Cedar as an authorization syntax is that it has schema. And I feel like the Cedar team is sometimes a little bit like there's this whole move to schemaless databases. Like, is schema a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. I think it's a feature. But what do you think, or how do you see like the view of schema working out? Should it be a part of policy, or is it something different, or is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think schema is critical. One of the things that we wanted to build into Cedar was the ability to to be amenable to automated reasoning and to be able to do policy validation. And so if you have a schema that says, this is what a hotel room looks like. This is the schema for a hotel room. It has a certain number of beds. It has a certain number of square feet. These are the attributes, right, of this object. And then you tell Cedar, like, hey, this is the type that this thing should be. This is what you should expect when you see a hotel room. Then it can go back to your policies and validate each of them and say, okay, does this even make sense? Does this policy even make sense? Will it always evaluate to true? Will it always evaluate to false? Will the input that comes in be the type that is expected? So those sorts of things really help the people who are humans authoring policies or AI authoring policies to make sure that they're not making mistakes as they go, because policy stores can get quite large and quite complicated. And so having these schemas in place allows us to do that sort of automated validation and make it mathematically provably correct. So without the schema, you really can't have that provability aspect. So it's really critical to what Cedar's trying to accomplish.
So the schema bounds the problem. Without the schema, the problem would be so big, and you wouldn't be able to reason over it.
Exactly.
What are your just sort of so I describe Cedar like a slow moving ship. You know, it's a very big piece of work, and it's moving forward like steadily with a lot of momentum. And I guess you know, you have an interesting perspective. How do you see Cedar doing in terms of adoption and problem solving and technology? Like, what are your thoughts at a high level?
Well, I'm very glad that it got built before AI came along. I
Mhm.
think that it's especially critical now that we see how tricky AI is in breaking out of sandboxes and getting away with things and hiding things and actually deceiving its users. Um, the fact that we have a mathematically provable policy language is critical now more than ever. So I'm really glad that we built it. I'm really glad that it went into the CNCF. But like you say, open source projects are going to be slow. They are going to be slow intentional, right? It is a community effort. We want to make sure we get it right the first time. This is absolutely a mission critical project for technology at large, for all the people working in this room. And so we want to make sure that the right decisions are being made. And I think especially the governance of CNCF gives us that structure to have multiple companies come in and work together on what Cedar should be in the future.
Um, and so, what are you doing now at Beyond Identity? What's your role there, and sort of what's your area of work now that you're on move beyond Cedar land?
Yeah, so I'm working on a few different things. I'm working on basically my team does innovation and standards, and so we are the people on the board of FIDO, working in IATF, working in the OpenID Foundation. So working on all of those standards, and now just today, MCP got donated to the Linux Foundation, so we'll be working on that as well. And then in terms of innovation, we're working on specifically authorization for an MCP gateway to say, if your organization has developers, right, and they're using Claude code all over the place, what MCP servers are they connecting to, both local and remote? What tools are those MCP servers calling? How could they be exfiltrating data? What kinds of things are they asking for? Giving you visibility into all of that, and then giving you an authorization layer to say, okay, this is allowed, this is not. I don't want that MCP server doing elicitation, right? Specific granular ability to control what is going on in your environment, so that you can enable your developers and your staff at large to use AI without being terrified that MCP is going to do remote code execution, that it's going to be exfiltrating data, that it's going to be installing malware. All of these things are possible because MCP is very, very young still, but it's being very widely adopted. So we're working on some solutions to that, and we're working with other companies on how to standardize those things.
Yeah, what I've been sort of shocked by is that MCP has been so transformational that companies want to build a natural language interface into their data to to talk to their database and ask questions and get information back.
Which is great.
Great, which is great, and also opens up a new avenue of possible confused deputy, where you trick the AI into telling you things. And we have lots of examples about how AIs, get tricked to do stuff.
Correct. And a lot of people aren't using OAuth for authorization of MCP like they're supposed to in the spec. A lot of them are still using API keys. And so you have people in marketing and people in accounting and people who never would have asked for API keys saying, oh, hey, I need that now. And they may not even know that they're supposed to keep API keys a secret, right? They may not even know what an API key is. They just know that they want to talk to the database, like you said, and that database is asking for an API key. And so they go and look it up and they copy and paste it. And God knows where else they copy and paste it or where they commit it or things like that. And so it's a wild new world of kind of secret sprawl that didn't exist before.
Yeah. I'm a vendor, and so I'm probably guilty of this too. But it seems like the promise doesn't align with the reality, where I'm not sure that we know how to create the identities for the workloads. Like, how do we identify them and how do we authenticate them? How do we issue the tokens? What do those tokens look like? What are the flows to obtain those tokens? How to write the policies? Or how to govern the policies. Like, I feel like we're missing all of that, and that there's no quick answer, and that the answer to that might be generational. And as an industry, we want to, as vendors especially, we want to quick solutions and build products and go to market and take care of this, or harvest this greenfield opportunity. But the reality of this is that this has been a challenge of software identity and authorization that has been laying latent there for years, but hasn't really had the board level attention of its inadequacies to enable the board to say, we better get on this, or we're going to fall behind in a competitive disadvantage kind of a way. But what do you think is the how long does this infrastructure take to build? Is this something that we're going to see in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Or like, how long can we, AI happens so fast, but can security happen just as fast?
I certainly hope so. I mean, it's definitely going to evolve over the next 5, 10, 15 years. This is one of the places where the technology is very early, and so customers can have a lot of influence. Like, that's true at Beyond Identity. I'm sure it's true at Glue, where because we are building a product that is so new and so unknown so far in this space, that customers can have a lot of sway if they come in and say, hey, this doesn't work with this part of my infrastructure and I need it to. You're not looking at this risk and I need you to take signals from this place and put them over there. All of those things, I think, are going to evolve as we get feedback from customers. And so I think the whole space is going to evolve. And you're right, we don't have great best practices yet. It's just too new, it's too young, and we'll evolve those over time. But one of the things that's really encouraging is that in terms of like funding from the board, what we're seeing is that CISOs and security teams who asked for funding for projects for years and years and years and years and years and didn't get it, they're now getting AI money. And so the board is saying, okay, we need to secure AI and make sure that this is all being done safely. And so some of that money is actually being used to do the infrastructure projects that have been neglected for years. And so maybe there is actually something good to this where because it took so long, now we can sort of leapfrog and move ahead of it and make an end-to-end solution that includes AI and humans and deterministic workloads and all of that. So I am hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
I like that you mentioned end-to-end, and because that sort of leads into my next question. So I'm a big fan of the show Murderbot.
Me too.
And so one of the things that Murderbot made me think about is he has this governor module embedded, which sounds a lot like a PDP to me.
Yep.
Actually, I think of the governor module as the seederling,
yeah.
But a lot of the solutions today are thinking about the middle, like they're thinking about the MCP server, which is the infrastructure, but not the edges. The bot is really the thing at the edge. The database is at the other edge.
Yeah.
Do you think that that AI bots need a governor module? Do we need to push authorization out to the bots, or do we somehow not trust the bots or the agents, and we only can trust the infrastructure? Like, what's your thought on where do we put PDPs in this architecture?
I mean, what you're describing, like the governance module would live in the client, right? It would live in like the IDE. If you're developing in Cursor, mm-hmm. Cursor would have some sort of policy decision point that says, hey, the LLM wants to do this to the code. Am I going to allow that or not? That would be an interesting place to put the policy.
Right, or a browser. What's
Or
really
browser, yeah.
terrifying is that the browser is like really conflated with identity, where if you have a cookie, you're that person.
Yeah.
And then we have an agent that's controlling the browser, which is basically impersonating the person.
Yeah.
Does the policy guardrails belong in the browser itself?
It could. It certainly could. It is slightly terrifying to me now that we have AI-enabled browsers that can completely imitate users. I think AWS sued Perplexity for this reason, that Perplexity was just replaying passwords, which is a huge no-no in the security space. You do not collect and replay passwords. That's why we built OAuth. That's why we have APIs, right? That's why we have MCP. It was so that we can do this properly and do it securely. That sort of pattern where the browser just completely imitates the human and does exactly the same things that the human would do, that's really scary from a security point of view. And so I would love to see something in the browser that says, you know what, if we're seeing credential replay, like just stop everything that's going on right now.
Right, right. Yeah, if my agent or the agent is not allowed to replay credentials or something. Yeah, I don't know how this will work eventually either. Um, and Interesting. So um, lost my train of thought there. Um, and I don't know what are your other thoughts about authorization? Where else is this going? Um,
Yeah, I mean, fine-grained authorization is kind of the holy grail that we're trying to achieve right now, and doing that across domains so that if an LLM is working on solving a problem and it needs to access, 5 or 6 different databases, SaaS services, documents to do that, that it can do it in such a way that it is respecting the same policy store in each case.
right.
That's a really complicated problem. And also, we need to know who it's acting on behalf of, right? It might be working with a whole team of people where OAuth was designed to be one person. I, Sarah, am delegating this application to go and read my email for me. Now it might be, hey, the marketing team needs to know all of this competitive research. Please put together a thing for them. And OAuth really wasn't built to do that sort of multi-user authorization question. So I think we're going to need some combinatorics math or something,
Right.
something there. That's probably one of the edges that we're going to be working on, is how to solve that problem as we see it, like an AI agent becoming a true team member and not just a acting on behalf of.
Right. I was actually going to ask you. Now I remember my question. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot while my brain froze. Sometimes that's good. Why you have a second host to think of the questions.
Right.
My question was about the tokens that represent the identities. So these are input to policy. So I've had this theory about token-based access control,
Yeah.
where the tokens are the evidence that become input to policy. And whereas a lot of our access control mechanisms today are based on the human, so what's the role of the human? What are the claims of the human? The truth is like, we actually don't have a connection to the human. We have an artifact in the form of a token that represents some attested information about the human that was connected to this browser, and that's presented in the form of tokens, normally JWTs. So what 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 if we just move to an authorization policy or framework where we say the tokens are the important input that tell us about the human identities and the machine identities that I'm working with, and based on that I can make a decision about this action on this resource with this context.
Yeah, I think there's a draft in the IETF right now that Jeff Lombardo and Peter Castleman are working on from AWS and De facto security, respectively, that is using JOT authentication for spiffy workforce identities to do exactly this. To say, once we have that JOT has signed attestations, we can look up the metadata of the client, we can know that this key is valid, and then we can make access management decisions based on just the contents of that token alone. And we don't need client credentials, we don't need other things, we can just make the decisions on what's in the token. So it would be essentially token-based access control. Yeah.
Is this the IDJAG, the identity, the JWT assertion grant?
Yes. Yep.
IDJAG. Yeah.
There you go.
It took my eyes a couple of times to see that, to like make the association with what spec it was. Cool. Well, we wanted to keep this short. We're at 20 minutes, so we're already 5 minutes over. Thank you so much, Sarah. Any last thoughts before we break?
No, thanks so much for. I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. Thanks for capturing me at the conference. And yeah, anybody who's listening, feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you want to nerd out about JOTS and workforce identity, fine-grained access control.
And maybe we'll do a real follow-up, a full-length follow-up on authorization or some other
That would be great.
topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us.
Thanks.